Welcome on into another episode of Believe in TCU. I'm Jackson James, and we have our first breaking news story out of TCU in today's episode. But first, I'm always going to say, make sure you guys are subscribed to this podcast. We are almost to game week. Like this time next week, we'll be talking about an actual football game. So I'm super excited. So make sure you guys tune in every week and subscribe, and also like the podcast so I know that you guys are enjoying them. If I need to change anything, let me know, because I'm super excited. But yes, we have our first breaking news story today, and it's not a good one. If you've seen in the news lately, you've seen that TCU dismisses star safety Jacob Fields for team rules violation. I saw this and I was like, whoa. And you never really want to see your teams in the news before the season starts, right? We just had the AP poll come out, but you don't really want to see, bad press early on in the season. And it's close enough where you have to a little bit worry about it. If this happened 2 months ago, sucks, and it's a tough blow, but your team will get over it. This was recent, and we'll dive into it. So senior safety Jacob Fields, who transferred from Louisiana Tech, where he earned 2025 Conference USA Co-Defensive Player of the Year honors with 92 tackles and 3 interceptions, transferred to TCU. And then he was just removed from the TCU roster. Apparently it was a violation of team rules. Apparently he was a good transfer piece for the Frogs. He was going to be a potential game changer for the Frogs secondary, and unfortunately some things went down allegedly in the locker room. I'm not going to talk about them too much in this podcast. If you guys are interested, it was like trending for me, maybe because I'm following a bunch of TCU accounts, but you can probably just look up even TCU, and that's probably plastered everywhere. And so one, not a good look for the program, and two, hurts just the team overall. And so let's dive into it. This whole episode theme was going to be vibes, and I think this can relate directly into that. But let's talk about how this looks for the coaching staff. Apparently, some coaches knew of some things going on in the locker room that, let's just say, weren't player friendly, and Sonny Dykes didn't necessarily know the full extent of it. And now clearly, apparently this incident happened early August. And so they've been sitting with it, maybe investigating it with an in-person team with TCU football, and they've decided it's probably best for Fields to move on away from the program. And it's a tough situation for all parties, involved. I do think there's, some stuff that we'll never truly know what the extent was. I don't believe we've seen issues like this for a while for TCU. I can't think of one that's happened under Sonny Dykes. There was the Cavante Turpin situation when Gary Patterson was the head coach, more of a domestic abuse situation. So this being an in the locker room, right, situation it portrays a very negative light about the program and could be the first red flag heading into this year. And so let's talk about what the vibes are for this year. And this isn't obviously the first thing that you want come to mind when you're thinking about the vibes for TCU, but it's almost like they have to prove themselves. It feels like not a make or break year, but are they going to make something of it? And I think this situation is kind of a step back, right? ESPN, I'll be interested if they talk about this week 1 against North Carolina. I'll be very interested just because of all of the press that this is getting currently. I mean, college football, everyone's grasping for straws for any stories they can talk about in college football. And so this one is obviously at the forefront of everyone's minds right now. Does this have the length to make it a week and a half? No. Jacob Fields is a transfer player. He also wasn't one of the more notable Frogs going into the season. Now, he was one of the better transfers and could have really made a name for himself. But now I think this kind of resets not only his career, because people don't really want to touch players that were dismissed from programs, especially TCU being, a very solid program, a Power 4 program. And so it's interesting to see TCU make this decision at this point in the season. But when you're talking about vibes, it makes me a little bit hesitant. It has a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And that's one thing I'm a little bit hesitant about, especially when it's kind of a prove it year for this TCU team. Sonny Dykes, we've talked about it. He's got his extension, but it's like, are you going to be anything more than, an 8-win, 9-win coach? Are you going to get back to that national championship game? I think there's a lot on the line for Sonny Dykes' coaching pedigree, right? You bring over a new OC, Gordon Samus from UConn, a little bit of change there. You have another quarterback under your belt. One thing we could criticize Sonny Dykes a little bit about is his quarterback decisions a little bit, right? When you look back at his first season in 22, the quarterback room was between Chandler Morris and Max Duggan. Chandler Morris won the starting job in the offseason, gets injured in that first game at Colorado. Max Duggan takes over and completely flourishes. Like, dude is amazing, second in Heisman voting. And you're like, okay, mistake maybe on Dykes' part, but he coached Max Duggan to have his best career years. You got to tip your cap. But then the next year, Chandler Morris was a flop, right? He didn't live up to the hype, turnover prone, didn't necessarily, light the stat sheet up. And then Josh Hoover takes over a little bit later in the season. You're like, okay, there's some promise here. And then in 2024, again, shows that promise, shows he's a very capable quarterback. In 2025, a very talented quarterback, yet his Achilles heel was the turnovers. And so there's been a little bit of nitpicking when talking about Sonny Dykes' quarterback coaching ability, right? Obviously, he was at Cal with Jared Goff. That was one of his claim to fames, going over to SMU to be their head coach. And then coming over to TCU, he kind of had pieces that weren't necessarily his. He didn't recruit most of these players, goes on a run to the national championship game, wows everybody, completely shocks the world, right? TCU was never even considered to even win the Big 12, I believe, that season. And so now you're kind of having to live up to those high expectations ever since. And he has not even come close, unfortunately, to those expectations. And I think there's a lot of hype going into this year. I mean, you're talking about big news stories this offseason. Texas Tech, who seemed to be the huge favorite in the Big 12, still is, has a big quarterback controversy, right? Their quarterback's betting on games. That blew up, right? That's almost 10 times the story this is for TCU, right? Just because the allegations and gambling in the sports world will always be big stories, right? Do they take a step back this season because of that story? What about some other teams, right? Other teams are primed to take that next step. BYU, Utah, Arizona, right? These teams are coming off great 2025 seasons. Can they transform that into a successful 2026 season? And can TCU still do their way into that mix? We'll have to see. This story almost wants you to take your foot off the gas, but I think expectations stay the same regardless of what happened this past week, because TCU is in that weird mix in the Big 12 where they're above average, but can they break through? We'll have to see. Now I want to talk about it from the locker room's perspective, right? Now, who knows whether or not they got along with Fields in the locker room, right? We don't know the true dynamics of this team. We don't know where the friendships are, what the team camaraderie looks like. We don't know any of that, right? So from our purview, we probably have to assume with some of the allegations that are being thrown out and whatnot, he wasn't the most popular guy in the locker room. So looking at the optimistic side of this, maybe this changes a little bit of that locker room environment. Maybe some things won't be tolerated. But on the other side, it's like they clearly missed some things going on in the locker room. And then it kind of got worse and worse until the team finally decided to act, right? So for me, it's going to be not only a huge overheading cloud for this first game in Ireland, right? Like that is a quick turnaround for a team to go through with this, because in the back of the mind, right, it's like, oh, big team drama. But then once it gets, released to the public, you get a little bit of the chatter, especially with TCU, which is, a very tight-knit Fort Worth community, right? A lot of people care about TCU football much more than any other Fort Worth sport. It can get a little bit bigger than what it actually is, especially at a smaller school compared to the Big 12 teams. that TCU is. And so for the locker room, it's going to be a huge leadership season for Sonny Dykes. I'll get to that in a second. But also your stars on the defensive side of the ball. His partner in crime, probably a bad choice of words there, but his partner on the field, Jamel Johnson, right? What is he going to show this TCU defense in terms of leadership? What is he going to, tell the guys in the locker room how to move on from this, how to build off this, right? What about Sonny Dykes? What about Andy Avalos, right? What is he telling his defensive guys? Hey, we got to move past this. You got to be the guy, right? Some reports coming out that, yes, they lose Jacob Fields. It's a hurt, right? It hurts to lose a quality player who has a proven track record. But they still have Jordan Lester, who could be a solid 1-2 punch with Jamel Johnson. JD Andrews said that. He's my boy. And that's a good thing, right? But now you take a little bit of a step back in terms of your depth, which on defense, it's almost way more important than it is on the offensive side of the ball. So you're going to have those players really step up week one. And I'll tell you this. If TCU can get off to a great start week one, I've talked about the top 5 most important games. This UNC game is probably the 5th most important game on the schedule. I may bump it up one more spot just because of this story, but also it's almost a step for leaders on this team, for Sonny Dykes to really show their leadership skills and really rally in an uncomfortable situation, right, with this story, but then also going over to Ireland, playing an international game week 0, right, against a team that's coming in with a lot of unknown. They just selected their starting quarterback 2 weeks before the season starts. I think that's a little bit strange, right? They don't have training camp, so they have to make their decisions. But picking your starting quarterback 2 weeks before the season starts is a little bit of a red flag, right? TCU has a chance to get an attention-grabbing win week 0. It's a primetime game at 11 a.m., right? It's one of the first games on that Saturday, right? If they do a college game day countdown or whatever, that'll be the first game right after. Most eyes are going to be on this game, right? Not only being on ESPN, but being one of the few Power 4 games happening that weekend. So TCU's leadership, their play on the field won't show the whole story. It'll be what's going on behind the scenes. If they find themselves down 1 or even 2 scores, we'll see the true emotions of this football team early on in the season, which you don't want to see, but you'll see it tested somewhat on that Saturday. So I'm going to be watching those little things for sure, because it's going to be more important than ever for this program to get back off on the right track, right? They got through majority of the offseason without any major news, right? It was a lot of positive things. Jaden Craig looks great in fall camp. There are some sneaky defensive players like Gil Jackson Jr. on the defensive side of the ball that can make a name for himself, right? You have a lot of pieces working really well together. Camp was going smooth. And then bang, you get a big story like this. In the realm of TCU sports, this is a big story. And so how do you bounce back from that? You play well week 1. And you play well even when you're down, right? You set the leadership early, because your next 2 games should be games they cruise through. And you're not tested really to week 5 of the college football season. Especially because you're also going to have to sit with this UNC game for an additional week. So not only do you see moments when, hey, we were tested, we were down a score, maybe even 2, but hey, we stayed together and we rallied. That's a proof of a good football team. We'll have to see that in week 1, right? They'll have to rally from this story. And, that is going to be one of the main storylines I'm going to be focusing on that first week, or really that week 0 matchup, is the leadership capabilities of TCU. So that's my thoughts on that. To recap, safety Jacob Fields was dismissed from the program this week. He's a transfer from Louisiana Tech, won co-defensive player of the year honors, was going to be one of the better players for TCU this season. He is no longer with the program, and TCU will have to move forward with a game in a week and a half. Big things happening for TCU football. So that's my thoughts. If you guys made it all this way to this end of this podcast, please leave a like and comment what your thoughts on this situation with Jacob Fields is, because I think it's definitely a little bit interesting to get people's perspectives on, hey, this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Teams will move on faster. Teams will hold on to this a little bit longer, especially when the coaching staff was involved in not knowing, right? That can leave a little bit of a rough patch when it comes to relationship building between the coaches and the players, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that. So let me know your guys' thoughts. This has been another episode of Believe in TCU. A little bit Debbie Downer of an episode, but we got some big things cooking as the games are only a week and a half away. I'm so excited. This is the spot to be for all TCU football this upcoming season. I've been Jackson James. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.